Okay, we're good. All right, so we are with Purple for Parents Indiana, and I'm Jennifer McWilliams. I'm the CEO, and I'm with Rhonda Miller, the president of Purple for Parents Indiana, and we wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Bill SB 288 on obscenity exemption. So if you want, Rhonda, you want to explain that a little better?
Sure. So what SB 288 does in essentiality is it removes the obscenity exemption for public schools and public libraries. That exemption is allowing schools and the public libraries to disseminate material harmful to minors, which is basically porn, obscene material. And so that has been in place for decades now. And as we progress, we're seeing more and more content that is very damaging to children that is surfacing in those entities. So basically what we want to try to do is remove that exemption for those two situations where children should be protected and not harmed, which is basically what this stuff is doing. So that is basically what SB 288 does. It does put in some penalties for doing so. And that statute is 3549.34. If you want to look it up on Indiana Code, the original statute dealing with obscenity to minors is 3549.33, and there it spells it out very clearly what they cannot do. And so we're just asking to revert back to that original statute.
Right, and we testified on Wednesday about this bill, and I'm not sure that everyone that was opposing it understood that there's actually a definition already out there on what is obscenity, right?
Correct. That is correct. The obscenity, let me see if I can find it here. Hold on just a second. So definition of obscenity, the Supreme Court has never ruled it as protected free speech. The basic guidelines, whether the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interests, whether the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct specifically defined by the applicable state law, or whether the work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. So that is the legal definition of obscenity. And so what we are asking to do is just revert back to the original definition of that and protect children with that material that's coming in.
Right. Yep. And so, I mean, the law is already there outside of libraries and schools. So obviously there's a way for a judge, prosecutor to figure out what that was. So I just want to make sure that clear, because in court, it seemed like, when we were testifying, it seemed like some of the people were confused on that. So there's actually a way.
Yeah, there's confusion about obscenity, and then there's confusion about there's a Miller test that should apply to further define what that is. And the Miller versus California case at the Supreme Court defines it three ways. There's a three-pronged Miller test. It's as follows. Number one is whether the average person applying contemporary adult community standards finds that matter taken as a whole appears to be to prurient interests, which i.e. an erotic, lascivious, abnormal, unhealthy, degrading, shameful, or morbid interest in nudity, sex, or excretion. Number two, whether the average person applying contemporary adult community standards finds that the matter depicts or describes sexual conduct in a patently offensive way, ultimate sexual acts, normal or perverted, actual or simulated, masturbation, excretory functions, lewd exhibition of the genitals, or sadomasochistic sexual abuse. And then number three is whether a reasonable person finds that matter taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. So any material that satisfies this three-pronged approach may be found obscene. And that is the guidelines that we're asking to apply going forward to remove schools and libraries.
Yep, exactly. And we're going to go over some of the testimony that was on Wednesday. And I think for me, it was important for people to know before they see this that we actually were able to give them, the members of the committee, an entire folder, right? Full of information that we found, you and I found by searching the schools, their databases, their online library catalogs of the books they have in the school. So we had already given the committee a folder with all of this information and proof that these schools are providing obscenity to children. But the people that testified did not realize that we had already done that. And I also thought it was important. One more thing before we go on is we were not allowed to read the material that we found in the schools when we were testifying. They said it was too offensive, and that they asked us to, since the committees had the folders, they asked us to not read the material and testify that at the state Senate House. So, that seems like it really should be case closed. If we can't read it when we're testifying at the Senate on a bill that has to do with that, then they should not be giving it to our children.
Well, and it was interesting when they sent the young man up to tell us that, because he made the reference to the fact that, this video, people can watch it, a live stream, and it's also recorded and then it's put back up on the website. So he made the comment, I don't remember his exact words, but this could be shown in a classroom, and he wouldn't want us reading that material. And I had to chuckle, because if we can't read it, because he's afraid it's going to be live streamed or played back in the classroom, then why on earth are we allowed to distribute it within the classroom? So I did say to him at one point, I kind of chuckled and I said, you know what, you just proved our point for us.
Yeah.
So it was interesting.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And we understand not reading it somewhat, because we're trying to get rid of it out of the schools.
Right.
So, okay.
And I had my testimony all ready to go, and I had already watered it down. And then when he said that, I said, okay, here are some things that I was going to address, and this is how I was going to address them. And he said I would probably reword it again. So I had to go back and water down the watered down version of my testimony, just to satisfy what they wanted.
Yeah, what was allowed. I had to do the same thing. I had to take out some websites out of my testimony as well. So that's an important point for people before we get started.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to present. We'll go through each person and some of their testimony, and then we'll talk about it. So the first one is from Tim McRoberts, and he is the director of the Indiana Association of School Principals. And before I start, I just want people to, listen for the common phrase of unintended consequences. Rhonda, can you hear okay?
Yep. Again, my name is Tim McRoberts. I'm the Associate Executive Director for the Indiana Association of School Principals. And I do appreciate Senator Tom's introduction. I think that helped us understand a little more in regard to what is the purpose of some of this legislation. But we have concerns as a Principals Association of some of the perhaps unintended consequences that could come about because of this legislation. There are processes in place currently in our public schools. There are local school boards who help make decisions and drive decisions about curriculum within the schools. And there's a process in place for parents who have concerns and issues to take those issues to the school and to the school board. So school districts and communities are very different in regard to values in those certain areas. So we really just appreciate the ability for local control and local decisions to be made in that regard. I think it was a couple years ago, I'm sure Senator Raatz, you could tell me, but there was some legislation that was passed in regard to sexual education instruction in schools that provided for review of curriculum by parents and opt-out forms and those types of things. And as I mentioned, the unintended consequences. I mean, could this end up extending to school plays and dramatic productions and literature that's read in English classes or government classes, those types of things? If it's a kind of an individual interpretation of what's appropriate or not, would be worried that could expose some of our schools in that sense. So those are our concerns, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Any questions for Ms. McRoberts? Senator Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Tim, for your testimony. guess my question is who is determining what would be harmful to the children? Would it be fair to say that what I think might be harmful, you might disagree with that? And maybe kind of expand upon that.
Well, I think that was, when I first read this legislation, was my biggest question is, who would, I would suppose, and I'm assuming all this, and I know that's dangerous, but an individual parent or community member would have the concern and raise the initial concern, would be, I guess, where that would start. So I guess that's part of my point. Every school, most school districts have materials that they don't allow to be used in class because certain communities have different standards than other communities. So, when you're talking about literature, you're talking about musicals and theatrical productions and all those types of things. Communities help regulate those. I don't know if that addresses specifically your question or not, but.
Yeah, it does. And I guess my follow-up question, Mr. Chairman, if I may, to Tim is, if I was a student trying to access harmful material, pornography on the school's computer, is it your testimony that there is technology in place to block that from the pupil to seeing it? Is that correct?
Yes, there are all kinds of blocking things that schools use, and there's also, kids figure out ways around those things, and I know that schools, as soon as they find that out, their technology people get behind it and come up with another way to block that harmful materials. But schools do the best they can in that regard, yes.
Okay. May I do one last?
Okay. All right. So, were you able to hear all of that?
Yes, I heard it all.
Okay, good. So with his testimony, I just wanted to point out a couple things. Again, he was confused on, I felt like, how that would be defined, which we already discussed. And when he talks about, could this hurt school plays? We are talking about children, minors,
right?
Kindergarten through 12th grade. Okay. Once a child is out of 12th grade and they go on to college or whatever they do in life, right, and they become 18 years old, then what they do is what they, you can go to college if you want to take a class, drama class or whatever. And this exemption then this obscenity law will not be applied the same way as what we're asking for. I would say, just from working in the schools, if a school, a teacher, administrator is looking at anything, any kind of material, a play, right, just err on the side of caution. These are people's children. So even though there's some children out there that or parents that think it's okay for their child, whatever it may be, there's other ones that do not. And a public school needs to fairly represent everyone. And so that means that they need to err on the side of caution, in my opinion.
Yep, I totally agree. And a couple of things I found interesting in his testimony. First of all, he was the very first one to testify, and he immediately brought up the fact that we had fought in 2018 over the parental rights bill over sex education. So that tells me they were equating this as well as part of sex education, which, when you have to understand the agenda behind that, you have to realize that Planned Parenthood is heavily involved in sex education. And Leslie Montgomery from Planned Parenthood, Indiana and Kentucky, is on record saying that they want comprehensive sexuality education through the entire curriculum. So what we are talking about, this obscene pornographic material that's coming through the literature books, is all part of that. So I thought it was, one, interesting that he pointed out about sex education in our battle. Parents cannot opt their kids out of English class, and they do not know what necessarily their kids have access to in the schools via the public library, the school library, or the classroom. A lot of these teachers will have books on their shelves available for children to check out. And they promote this literature to the kids. I know of one particular incident very locally that the teacher is still promoting one of the books that was objectionable on her bookshelf. She has 4 copies of it. So you cannot tell me that he mentioned, local control with local school boards. Well, what happens is these teachers have some flexibility for supplemental material, and they're not necessarily going through proper channels to have that vetted. We've time and time again run into that situation where teachers are using material in the classroom that has not been approved by the school board or their curriculum team or curriculum committee. So that is interesting that he would point that out and hammer that issue, when in reality, what we're seeing is the exact opposite. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Yep. I think it was, Senator Ford from District 29. That's Boone, Marion, and Hamilton County areas. He said, is it fair to say that families decide what's right? Yes, that's fair to say. Families should decide. But when the child's in the school, like you were just saying, they don't know everything that is going on. Not everything comes home, right? If the child goes to pick out a book and they have it in their desk or bag, whatever, and it's reading time and they pull out this book to read, the parent doesn't know what that book is. So instead, the school's assuming that responsibility for that child, and that is not their place when it comes to obscene materials. So I actually agree. Yes, Senator Ford, it's definitely up to the families and not the schools. And that is why the schools should err on the side of caution.
Right. And we're seeing parents who are coming together and saying, no, we don't want this material in our school. And then sadly, what you're seeing is this gentleman is pushing back and saying, well, no, it'll have unintended consequences, unintended consequences to, plays or musicals or whatever. Well, I highly doubt the one scenario that we had posted on our page that was a very descriptive and very graphic detail of a young girl being raped by a young man and how he knew he would get away with it. I highly doubt that you're going to see any type of play in school along those sorts of things. So to throw that out there that you're going to have unintended consequences for plays, if your school is doing obscene and pornographic plays, then my goodness, there's a bigger issue than just books.
Yes. Yeah. There are a lot of plays that would not fall within obscenity. Choose one of those.
Right. Exactly.
I agree. Okay, let's see. I'll do the next slide here. And we already went over.
Again, my name is Tim McRoberts.
We already went over this, but I had just put on here to make sure that people were clear. There is a definition on the books.
Yes.
So that's important in this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the next one is Bob Swaney, director of Carmel Clay Public Library. And I'm going to play him now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for this opportunity to provide testimony. My name is Bob Swaney. I'm the director of Carmel Clay Public Library and a member of the Indiana Library Federation, the State Association of Academic, Public, School, and Special Libraries, and the people that work in them. I'll try to make my concerns of this bill as brief as I can. First, though, let me set the stage. I saw a quote from author E.L. Doctorow that said, there are three important documents for any citizen in a free society: birth certificate, passport, and a library card. And I think it's worth noting that American libraries are the institutional symbol of free speech, not Facebook or Twitter, but are American libraries, and they're well loved. And so with that in mind, I want to share that we absolutely do support the protection and safety of children. We oppose this bill because we believe it is unnecessary, because there are already adequate protections in place to do that. Indiana law already provides for prosecution of criminal acts with children, such as sexting, trafficking, child seduction, abuse, and even failure to report. And teachers and librarians are required by law to report child abuse if they witness it. That's law. And libraries already follow state and federal laws related to Children's Internet Protection Act. and utilize filtering technology to control internet access. In addition to that, public libraries and school libraries have policies that govern, that prevent pornography being accessed digitally. So the combination of policies and software. And school libraries operate under local control. Public libraries operate under state standards and local controls. Public libraries have community boards that govern policies that are created, that governs collections, how materials are purchased, what governs the criteria to do that. And most of that is community driven. And I think it's very important to point out that public libraries do not act in loco parentis. Public libraries do not decide for the parent what material is appropriate for the child. Families make that determination. And I can tell you from experience, families have very different, there's a variety of opinions across families of what they want their children to be exposed to read. They're best equipped to make those decisions, not libraries or schools. And so the language of this bill is just too ambiguous. And I do believe it can lead to unintended consequences. And I think everyone here has probably seen laws that have led to unintended consequences. You probably know that better than me. But in this case, I can see from the perspective of libraries, that's a danger. And so I respectfully ask you to please defeat this bill. It's too ambiguous, and we already have the protections and guardrails in place that we need. And thank you for this opportunity, and thank you on behalf of Indiana Libraries. I'm here with Lucinda Norton, the Executive Director of ILF, and if you have questions for her, she can take them. Otherwise, I think she's wanted to cede her time to me.
Senator Leising and Senator Melton, I think if you have questions, you're up beyond
Yes,
her.
can you tell me the current relationship between schools and public libraries now in Indiana?
Yes, it really does vary from community to community. Some school libraries and public libraries have very vigorous, strong connections. Others, not so much. Those are local driven decisions. In Carmel, for example, we do work closely with the high school. Our library is essentially on campus with that high school. So you'll see a wide degree of variance from community to community.
So if this bill was amended to restrict public libraries, that still would not, or would exclude public libraries, that still would not keep kids from accessing them through their school library. Is that right?
Right, but again, I would point out that school libraries and public libraries both, they have policies in place to address this. Concerns can be brought to the community, and there's a process that's in place to address those concerns. So anyone that feels that there is a work that shouldn't be in the library can express that, and it will go through a process and be heard at a school library or a public library.
But right now, if I'm a 15-year-old and I walk into a public library, there's really no restriction on what books I could rent or take out, right?
Right. And there's where it's important to emphasize the family control, because some parents want their children to have access to the entire library and in fact insist on it, and others want to be more involved in what their children are reading. Now I would point out that for the parents that want to be more involved, they will find partners in the library. We're there to help with that. We work with parents and consult with them to make sure that they do understand what their children are reading. That's a resource that libraries provide. We're community partners.
And I know for some of us, we don't think of libraries maybe in all the electronic things that are offered, but I'm assuming everything that you have in the library is also electronic, right?
Not everything, but we do have a large digital collection, and that is growing. You will see ebooks as downloadable audiobooks and other digital resources like tutor.com.
Got 9 more after him.
So they're not completely equal. And I would say most libraries, you'll still see a larger collection that's in print than digital.
So, I guess once again, for concerned parents, unless they went to do you even have to physically go to the library to access the online things if you have a library card, or can you just do it from your home computer, iPad, school?
Yeah, there's a lot of content that can be accessed remotely outside of the school library or public library, and I would say that has intensified since COVID in 2020. But I would also point out that, again, they're not random materials that are being accessed. They are materials that are being selected by librarians, selected, also governed by collection development policies. And those policies will have elements in them, things like accuracy, authority, who the publisher is. Librarians will read reviews of the work before they make that selection. So there's a lot of thought and work that goes into selections before they're added.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Melton. Then
Okay. So, of course, he says unintended consequences again. And right out of the gate, he wants to talk about how the library is for free speech, but we should remind everybody that obscenity is not protected under the First Amendment.
Right, absolutely. And that is like a natural default mechanism that they all have. And that's, if you read, and I referenced it in my testimony, if you read the Naked Communist 45 Goals to Communism, 24 and 25 deal with exactly what we're talking about. And that's how they have instituted this stuff, is they have used it to say it's free speech. Well, it's not free speech when it comes to obscenity. So that's interesting that he automatically deflected to that and talked about child abuse laws and how they have, laws for sexting and laws for that, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about allowed inside the public school. So they immediately deflect, and that's very frustrating. And in fact, we also found another exemption for schools and libraries under a different law that pertains to what he's talking about. So he can reference that there's laws on the books, but there's also more exemptions that we're finding. So that is something that we're going to need to work, dig more into and expose that. The other thing he talked about is, the libraries make it so that porn is not digitally accessible. Well, you know what? You can't do that with printed books. And so you obviously allow printed books to be on the shelves for children to pick up. And so there's no protections against that. And he did admit that when Senator Leising asked him, a 15-year-old walks in, they basically have access to the entire library, correct? And he said yes. So that is an issue that's concerning. If we're going to allow obscene and pornographic content to be distributed through, taxpayer-funded schools and libraries, then that is something that the taxpayers have a right to stand up and say, no, we're not going to have this. So I think those are a couple of things that I had caught. There were some other things, but what were your thoughts?
Yeah, no, the same thing. And he wants the libraries to be left out of this situation, but then he also makes a point to say, we work closely with the Carmel High School. Our library is on their campus. We are community partners. Okay, so you can't separate the two. They go together, and on the school's websites, they have links to these libraries. They have links to the library databases. It's all the same. So but yeah, my thoughts as well.
Absolutely. And he did point that out. And I think that was what Senator Leising was getting at. You can't separate the two. They're so intertwined. And what we found even locally with the scenario we dealt with is that, they send the kids to the public libraries. They're back and forth. And so they're so interconnected. That's why we have to remove both from the exemption. And he's talking about this law being so ambiguous. Well, what's ambiguous about it? It's a statute that already exists. Right. So all we're doing is removing wording from the existing statute that gives you the protection of, giving this stuff to minors. And it's so aggravating because he talks about unintended consequences of what could happen to these institutions. Well, what about the unintended consequences for the children? Never once from these opposition people that are down there promoting, and supposing they say that they are, for children, they want to protect children, whatever. Not once did any of them say, we want to protect children from this material that is harmful, that causes addictions. If we wouldn't stand in the school classrooms and we wouldn't stand in the hallways handing them drugs, then why are we handing them porn? Because porn is now the new drug.
Yep.
So why would we allow that to happen under this obscenity exemption? And so it made it very clear as these individuals went on throughout the afternoon that not one of them was concerned about the harms this new drug of porn causes children.
Yep, exactly. They say they want to protect children. Well, then this is their opportunity to side with us and protect these children.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
agree. I have one more little clip from him, so we'll do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for this opportunity to provide testimony. My name is
Appreciate the answer. I don't want us to necessarily get hung up on a rating system. I just was using that as an example. But just the idea of some kind of quote unquote warning label, or basically a read at your own risk label, right? If we determine there's some material in there that certain families might find objectionable, is there some kind of cautionary indication when they pick that up that there may be some things in there that they want to double check? Especially in light of what Senator Toms is attempting to do with this bill, where it has to do with kids.
Yeah, Senator, I would suggest, I think that's one of the functions of the book dust jacket or the back cover of a paperback. I mean, that's giving you a quick encapsulation of what that book is about. I think trying to put even a warning label means that what happens if we were to miss a book that should have gotten a warning label under a certain set of criteria and it was missed, that could inadvertently do more harm than good. So I think we're better off just thinking critically, generally, looking at the work, reviewing the work, and using our librarians as a resource.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think we're all trying to accomplish the same goal, and that is
Okay, Mr. Swaney.
Yeah, so I thought Senator Crane did a really good job of addressing that issue of, putting a warning label or something on the books to let people know. And so I just want to say real quick that I actually was asked by a local pastor friend to go with him to his public library and address some of these books that are in the library. And he asked the same question. Can we put some kind of labeling system or, the same kind of similar system that is done with movies and things? You wouldn't let a 10-year-old go into an R-rated movie full of violent sex and nudity. So why would you allow them to read the same material in a library? And the librarian immediately pushed back and said, no, we can't do that. So that's essentially what he's saying too, is that they can't institute any type of program like that. And he basically wants free for all in his library. So I thought that was very telling.
Yeah. They don't want to have to worry about the responsibility. So I found
I was very thankful to Senator Crane for bringing that question up, though. I like that. That was good.
Yeah, I thought so too, and I thought it was really interesting because before we testified to make our packets, we had done a lot of research on what was going on in these schools, and what Mr. Swaney did not realize was that the committee members had a whole folder full of things, and specifically things from Carmel High School that he is a community partner with, works closely with, right? So I want to show everybody one of those things that we found. One of the extremely obscene books that we have found in schools across Indiana and libraries is a book called Exit Here by Jason Myers. And when I was researching, I found this book, and it was at Carmel High School, not at the library outside of that, but actually in the library of the school. Now, I had posted something in response to someone maybe a week or so ago, and lo and behold, it's gone. So if you search now, I think they have removed the book. But I would say to that, so if you had all of these fail safes in place, right? Why did you remove it? Why didn't you leave it if it was okay under your standards? But let's talk about this book. So I had at the time, I took screenshots, as we always do, of this book. So I'm going to show you what I found. All right, so here we have and this was found on January 3rd of this year, okay? And if you look up here, so I had pulled up this extra screen, but here behind it, you can see that this came from Destiny, which a lot of schools use Destiny as where you search for their online books, or not the online books, but the books that are in the school in their library. So then you have Destiny Quest, which will recommend schools. And over here, you can see lightly, it says Carmel High School. So that's where I got it. Down here, I wanted to point out that it says right here, it is a teen fiction. That's the series. And the summary says, college student Travis returns home and expects the usual drinking, doing drugs, and hooking up with girls. But because of an incident in Hawaii and an ex-girlfriend, things are different. Now, that's bad enough, right?
Right.
I mean, to me, that shouldn't be in the high school. But let's look at... I actually have the book because we bought it to do the research. And let's look at what the back cover that Mr. Swaney said that's where it's so important that part comes in. Let's look and see what it actually says. Okay. So here's the book. Here's the back cover. Travis is back from school for the summer, and he's just starting to settle into the usual pattern at home. Drinking, drugging, watching porn, and hooking up. They forgot that in their summary at the Destiny Library of the online or the books that's in the school, I'm sure.
Yeah, conveniently.
Right.
Conveniently.
Right.
What's also alarming about this book is we found that this book is basically written, well, according to Debbie DeGraff in her book, she says this book is written for a fourth grade reading level. So would anybody want their fourth grader reading that? But I think you even found even more alarming information about the level of this book.
Yes. Yep. So I'm looking right here. The reading level is, well, it's around 700. And so something that's important for people to realize is when kids are at school, many schools across Indiana use a program called Reading Counts. And I'm sure that there's parents that are familiar with this program. If your child says they're going to take an RC quiz, that's also the Reading Counts. It's through Scholastic. And children are evaluated at the beginning of the year on what's called their Lexile level. And that is their reading ability level, okay? And then on Indiana Department of Education, they have a Lexile grade level chart. So you can match that level of that child up to this chart to see where they should be reading. And if you have a child that is in I'll even go all the way out to the end of the year, if they are in the 90th percentile, which my son was an advanced reader, has always been an advanced reader, he would have fell into this category. In second grade, they could have read this book. And actually, once they start the Reading Counts program, they are required to pick books that are in within their Lexile range, maybe give or take 20, 25 points on either side. So they're going to send those kids over to get books that are in their Lexile range. So, and
that is very, very scary, because when you start looking really into these books and it's not only the content, but the words that are used. I mean, there's so many obscene slang words that are used in these books. And it's no wonder. I mean, you're hearing people talking about, the kids, using all kinds of foul language at school. Well, when you're requiring them to read Lexile number books that are like this at younger and younger ages, what do you expect?
Yes.
You know, it's allowed inside the school, which shouldn't be, which is what we're trying to do with removing this obscenity exemption.
Right. Yep. And also, I know just from being in the school that a lot of times, especially the students that want to stay on top of stuff, right, and not take homework home, they will use their time at school, their extra time. They get done with the assignment. They have 10 minutes to read. A lot of kids will finish their reading counts book at school, so it never comes home. So for Mr. Swaney and McRoberts, and for all of these people that keep saying, well, it's really the family's job to decide what's right. When the school is allowing them to get this material, never take it home, read it, take the quiz on it for their reading counts, then the school has just assumed that responsibility. And really, they're making our point because it is not their job to allow that to go on. Period.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't know who's vetting these books and how they're getting through, but somebody's obviously failing somewhere, because to think that this is acceptable for children to read is unconscionable to me. I don't understand it, honestly. And then, so if you would go back, Jennifer, to that slide where you showed the back of the book, the front and the back.
Yes. Yep.
I wanted to point something out. So when you look down at the bottom where it says Simon Pulse, and Simon and Schuster, I think it is, that is a publishing company. And these publishing companies, we need to start holding them accountable, because they are, in essence, printing porn for children and using our schools and our libraries as their distribution points. This is no different than Pornhub or, any of these other porn sites doing this in allowing access to children, or using children as their part of their porn scenarios. This is no different. You're printing porn with teenage stories in them, with teenagers participating in this, and you're distributing it to our schools and libraries. So I just wanted to point that out, because somebody needs to take some action against these publishing companies, and I hope something's done about that, because you're seeing more and more of these porn sites being sued for what they're doing. I think somebody needs to go after the publishing companies as well.
Yes. Yep. And that's exactly what it said on the previous slide, was that it is categorized as teen fiction. So
right.
Yep, I agree. It's crazy. So hopefully, now that Mr. Swaney, hopefully he'll get this message, and we'll try to do our best to let him know maybe he is misunderstanding some of the use of these books and the back cover of these books. And hopefully he'll side with us to protect these children.
Exactly. The other thing to take into account too is once these books are published, okay, so you have to think of this as a greater agenda. You have to look at it from a bigger picture, with 35,000 foot high view versus just the narrow into the school and classroom. So what these publishers do, they're all working together on this agenda to sexualize our children. So what these publishers do, they print these books, okay? And then as soon as they print these books with these authors, these porn authors, they print the material and then they distribute it. And what they do is, about the time they distribute it, is they give these books some kind of an award. So there's an award system that are, and reviews, give them high reviews, and they come with awards. So people who look at that as a scale overview don't understand what the actual contents are inside the material and inside the print. So I think that's something that we need to highlight, need to point out, that when you see these books getting publishing awards or whatever, don't take that to mean that this is a great book, because chances are it's not, because they have hundreds of these books that are written by porn authors. You have porn producers, you have porn authors. And I think that's something that we need to address.
Yep, exactly. And in our research, we found one of the most popular books right now at the school, even listed in the Destiny Quest top 10 books, also given awards. I think last year were one of these books for our schools. Yep, exactly. Let's see. So I think who is next? Okay. So Aaron, is it Negengard?
Yeah,
Negengard. Okay. He testifies, and his testimony was amazing, and I hope people go and watch the entire thing. But I have a clip here, and then we can discuss the follow-up questions that he receives.
And, there's been a parade of horribles and the ambiguity. This is not ambiguous at all. If a school or library or public library, a taxpayer-funded institution, violates a criminal law by disseminating matter that is harmful to minors. This law has been on the book for years. There's no question as to what that pertains to. It pertains to obscenity. Obscenity has never been determined by the Supreme Court to be protected free speech. To the contrary, obscenity is in violation, is not protected under the First Amendment to the Constitution, nor is it protected under the Indiana Constitution. It's really not that complicated. If a school were to disseminate this to minors, as they are currently doing, the stuff that you've been given, that we've been told not to repeat, is matter that has been used. It's our children's homework assignment. And we can't read it in the Indiana Senate. We can't read it. I would think that's a pretty good indicator that it's harmful to minors. If we can't read it in the Senate, then we shouldn't be given to freshmen for homework. That's what we're trying to do. There's no ambiguity here. It's very clear, and we act like, teachers aren't individually sued under this, and neither it's the institutions themselves that can be subject to liability. But I would submit that as a practical matter, you're not going to have a lot of litigation on this. What this will encourage is it will encourage schools and libraries to properly vet the material they're disseminating. And that's exactly what the point of the law is, to keep public institutions from disseminating pornography and obscenity that are harmful to minors. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. Questions from Mr. Negengard. Senator Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir, for your testimony. You had rattled off a list of child sexual assault, child pornography, child exploitation. All of those are current laws for the state of Indiana. Is that correct?
That's correct. As is matter that is disseminating matter to harmful matter to minors.
Okay. So you would agree that there's already a law in place that deals with what 288 is trying to do?
There's a law in place that exempts schools and libraries from, there's a law in place that protects them from being held liable under that law.
Okay.
So I could distribute to a minor that would be a crime. It's okay for my teacher to give it to my child as homework. And that's what this law seeks to remedy.
And how many examples of this happening in our schools and libraries have you brought for the committee today?
It's my understanding you've been provided a folder that and I have made copies as well. The folder of those excerpts was given as homework assignments by teachers in Indiana. I don't know the number of instances.
Okay.
Maybe some people could address that.
Great. My second question is, if you don't agree with the text selection or the book selection that your child is reading, do you have the right to ask for an alternative assignment for your child that covers the same skills?
I don't know.
Let me answer that for you, sir. That is already current law in the state of Indiana. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Okay, so Senator Ford says, by law, you can ask for a different assignment if you don't like what is being provided to your child. But I want Senator Ford to understand is that children are getting these materials and they're not always going home. Especially when I was just talking about the Reading Counts program. That's a perfect example because children will read these books at school on their off time, and then when they have library day, they go to the library and get their quiz done, and the parents never see what that book is. And in fact, the teachers don't check all of those books. What happens is that is all done through the computer. So as long as the child picks a book within the level and the child reads it and the child takes the quiz and passes it within the amount of time that they have to do that, the teacher just gets the information, gets the score, puts it into their grade, and moves on. So there's a huge problem there. Yeah.
Now, I totally agree with that point. And I would address the fact that, you know, what happened with one of the incidents I know of, there was a list of these books given, right? And there was a very brief description of the book that probably was on the online, and it was just printed off, and it was on these printouts. There was nothing in those that indicated there was any pornographic content. I mean, you looked at the review on Exit Here on online, and so until parents, start digging and start raising questions, they're not going to know. And had they not started digging in this particular situation, they wouldn't have found the actual contents within the book. And that's the problem. There's an overview, but it doesn't give you any graphic details. And it's not until you actually read the text. You can try to start watching something too. And if you aren't familiar with, the details of what's in the movie and you're only relying on the overview of it, you get into it and like, oh my word, I had no idea it was like this. And you shut it off, and protect your children. If you don't know what the contents are of these books and they're made available, it may not be necessarily an assignment. We've had many instances where we've been reported that there is, and a teacher was actually reading one of the pornographic books to the class in school. And the parents didn't necessarily know until a child happened to say something, But the fact that they're actually distribution points for porn, that is a major, major problem. That is something that needs to be addressed, regardless of, it being an assignment, and you can opt out and choose a different assignment for your child. The other thing to consider is when parents who aren't necessarily paying attention and haven't done, delved into this stuff, and parents are busy, I get it, but kids who have read this are going to go telling, oh, hey, so go check out this book. Look at what was in this book. And all of the kids are then going to go running towards this book, and looking to see where it's at. And they're all going to want to read it. And that is one of the things that we were told when we fought one of the situations we know about, is that these books get kids to read. Well, no kidding. You give a kid porn, they're going to read porn.
Yeah.
You can't, in a dumbed down level to boot. So you give a ninth grader, a 10th grader a book, and it gets them to read. Well, yeah, who wouldn't? I mean, seriously, any child is going to want to see that and go reading at it. And it's at a dumbed down level. So we're not making our kids smarter. We're making them dumber, and we're giving them porn to sexualize them.
Yes. And I think it's important for everybody to remember this is this is being paid for with our tax dollars.
Right.
So.
Right. We want to tax fund Pornhub. No. So why are we? And they're a distribution point. Pornhub is a distribution point. Why are we then using our tax dollars and funding distribution points for the schools and libraries? I guess that's the question that I really would like an answer to.
Right. Yep. That would be illegal, and you would be charged with a felony outside of these institutions.
Right. And I thought Aaron did a really good job. I was very, very thankful for Aaron coming to testify with us. I thought he did a great job of referring back to the original statute. It is against the law. When you look that original statute up, you cannot give a minor, access via visual, auditory, or physical access to this material. And you cannot distribute it, I think it's display, distribute, and I think it's sell within 500 feet of a church or school. That was our law.
Yeah.
There was no exemption. That was our statute until the obscenity exemption was put in decades ago. And now we're seeing the fruit of what has happened with that exemption. And so all Aaron was saying is, if you cannot do these things outside of the school, why then are we allowing an exemption? And it should not be that we can do it inside the school. If a grandfather or an uncle or whoever was reading or distributing that stuff to a child, he would get arrested.
Yeah.
But we have teachers, and we have schools, we have libraries who are almost gladly handling this stuff and distributing it to minors because they're so defensive of unintended consequences to them that they don't even seem to care about what it's doing to minors. And that is so frustrating for me, is because you are supposed to be mindful of children that you are there to protect, but yet you are afraid of the unintended consequences of parents holding you responsible for doing illegal activity if it wasn't for the exemption.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. All of them want to say, our number one priority is protecting children, then do it. Then do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Now's your chance. Now's your chance. If that is really what you believe down deep in your soul and your heart, then now is your chance. Why are you fighting it? Because if you're fighting it, you're letting it be known that you do not put them as a priority.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's right. I think Audrey's next. So this will just add to what we were talking about. Okay, so this is Audrey Warner, who testified for the bill, and we'll play this, and then Rhonda, you can explain a little more about what she's saying, because I think it's really, really important.
Okay.
To my testimony today. My name is Audrey Warner, and I'm a professor who teaches courses on the history of the sexual revolution. I am also a registered nurse that served as a public health nurse for 14 years in a county health department, 5 years as a school nurse, 9 years as a sexually transmitted disease HIV clinic nurse. For 5 years, I taught sex education in the schools and believed what I was told in my training, that I would decrease the teen pregnancy and STD rates. However, when I moved to the STD clinic, I saw the opposite was true. More children were sexually active and the rape of women and children was exploding. This led me to question why this was happening and what or who was behind it. My research led to Alfred Kinsey, professor at Indiana University, who was first known as an expert in the sexual behavior of the gall wasp. He was considered the father of the sexual revolution and did sex studies on humans in the 1930s and 40s. He concluded that children were sexual from birth, incest was not harmful, and one should have sex from birth to adulthood. How he came to his conclusion is the most alarming. He interviewed pedophiles who raped hundreds of children, some over a 24-hour period of time, and declared children were sexual from birth. He described children as having an orgasm if they cried, fainted, or fought away the partner. Notice he did not say perpetrator. Kinsey advocated for the removal of punishments for the rape of women and children because as sexual animals, nothing is harmful. He also pushed for obscenity to be shown to children to help them handle their sexuality. The American Law Institute, founded in 1923, used his criminal fraudulent data to draft the Model Penal Code in 1955. Of 197 footnotes in the Model Penal Code, Kinsey is the sole authority on normal human sexual behavior in the sex offense section. State commissions were set up to look at what was termed old and antiquated laws that once protected women and children. Experts in the field of law of psychiatry and law trained in Kinsey's science portrayed children as seducers, which took the responsibility away from the adult. Some legal experts advocated for the lowering of the age of consent to 4 to 7 years old. According to Kinsey, his trained experts, children needed to be trained in how to have sex with each other and adults. Obscenity laws that once protected children from sexual words and images had to be removed. SIECUST, or Sex Information Education Council of the United States, was launched from the Kinsey Institute at Indiana University in 1964 and became the authority for all sex education. The early leader was Dr. Mary Calderone. The seed money for SIECUST came from the world-famous pornographer Hugh Hefner. Many sex experts who advocated for sex education in the schools were on record as being paid by Penthouse Forum. The technique used was SAR, or sexual attitude restructuring, which groomed children for various sexual activities. I refer to the graphs in your packet, which show the explosion of teen pregnancy and STD rates since 1964. Bad data has led to devastating results for children. For the past 50 years, we treated children as sexual from birth, which has led to the public health crisis we have today. The CDC reports the highest STD rates among teens ever. The American Legislative Exchange Council, the largest bipartisan group of state legislators, not only proved that Kinsey's science was fraudulent and criminal, but that it's been used to remove protections for children. Their conclusion, as stated on page 14, which is in your packet, it is time to review many of the radical changes brought about by the enactment of the Model Penal Code and to restore the safety and security lost for our most vulnerable citizens, that being children. In the current Indiana Penal Code, the defense for those who show obscenity to minors was based on a man who believed infants would benefit from having sex with adults and the data gathered from men who rape children of various ages. The bill before you addresses these dangers to children, so I ask you to pass this through the Senate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any questions from the committee? Senator Ford.
Thank you for your testimony, ma'am. Do you consider LGBTQ topics to be obscene?
LGBTQ is, that is an issue, that's a social issue, and that is to be determined. So again, we're not promoting, if we're looking at Kinsey, if we're looking at children through Kinsey's eyes, then we want to talk about sexual orientations and sexual activities.
Senator Qaddoura.
Thank you for testifying today. I appreciate your healthcare background. Do you believe that guns on school campuses potentially could harm people?
I don't have any experience with talking about guns on campus. I have experience of talking about the children being sexually active. I have experience of pornographic material that is exposed to children. And that is why I testify in various places. I was just a few months ago, testifying before Uganda Parliament, who is now banning sex education from their schools.
I really appreciate your high level of education and training, and I think you did a fantastic job citing statistics and research institutions on this topic. I'm extremely surprised that you're not aware of the dangers of guns on campuses and the massacres that took place in the United States, including the killings of 23 or more kids at Sandy Hook and other places, or here in Westfield, Indiana, over 20 miles away from this building, when a school shooting took place. So I think, I never met with you in person, but I hope we get to know one another. I like consistency in policy arguments, and I think if we're advocating for for the safety of our children, I think we need to be comprehensive and bring all science and data to use it as we pass legislation. I appreciate you.
Yes, and thank you for that statement. I appreciate that. And I think the thing we have to remember is there's a lot of bad stuff going on in this world, and it is overwhelming. So as my one friend said to me, we need to stay in our lane. That one's not my lane. I'm an expert in this lane. So that's why I'm speaking to you on this.
So, oh boy.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, there is. I'm going to let you. So the obscenity exemption is a direct result of the fraudulent data from Alfred Kinsey. And that's why Audrey's testimony is so important, is because even the fact that we have that exemption, we can now look back through what we know and know that that was a total fraud as well. So I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah. So Audrey we had Audrey come and testify. She is an expert in this field. She's a nurse. She saw the consequences of sexualizing kids through sex education, and what it did to the diseases. And so she saw the progression. And she also knows the history of how things were changed based on the rape and torture of children and the lies and deception of Alfred Kinsey, which is here in Indiana. I mean, Indiana is responsible for everything that has happened across the globe, because this man went global through the United Nations. So to have her here to give the historical context as to why we have the obscenity exemption and why it came to be based on fraud and based on the rape and torture of children, I felt was very critical for people to understand that. And I'm hoping that it has its it was effective on the legislatures and for those watching to understand that this is much bigger than just porn in the schools. How did we get here? That's the question I think that needs to be answered. How did we end up with an exemption in our state statute that allowed pornography and obscenity to be distributed to our children to sexualize them and to get them hooked on sex? And so I think that was the whole point of her testifying. And I felt she did a phenomenal job of tying that all together based on her expertise. And I think that is a critical piece that we've got to get people to understand, that this is why we are where we are. And that's why we need to undo the damage that was done based on what Kinsey did and the fraud and the rape and torture of children, because that laid the foundation for everything sexual across the spectrum, including pornography that was basically the seed money to develop sex education. I mean, I hope people understand that. Hugh Hefner gave the seed money to a Planned Parenthood director, and that is what built SECUS, and that was designed to be the sex education arm of the Kinsey Institute. And when you go to their website, it now says SECUS, Sex Education for Social Change. Mm-hmm. That is their goal. That is their agenda. So that is why we are dealing with the porn coming into the kids through literature, through every facet, and we've got to remove that exemption from the schools and libraries. And that was what Audrey was laying the foundation for, was that understanding as to why we are where we are.
Mm-hmm. It's so important because we need to go back and take the steps to fix these things that we know are hurting these children.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And we have the proof, we have the knowledge, we have the statistics, and we all need to work together and protect these children. Yeah, definitely.
Right. And this was done decades ago. So you're seeing a decade's progression here. And we're seeing our society as a whole, slip further and further away. Well, this was a huge piece of the puzzle as to why that happened. So when you understand that he was working with the CIA, the Rockefeller Foundation, to take down our entire society, and then you look at the whole, like I said earlier, look at the 35,000 foot view of this whole thing, you understand why it's vitally important that we start unraveling the damage that was put into place decades ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you can see the effects everywhere. Mm-hmm. Yep. I wanted to also point out, Senator Ford brought up the LGBTQ, and to me, it's typical to divert to something that is not what we're talking about here. We are talking about the actual sexual acts of and being portrayed to children. So, and then Senator Qaddoura, who is District 30, Hamilton, Marion County area, says, do you know about guns on campus? Again, trying to deflect from the real issue. And I would point out, though, that it was not Westfield; it was Noblesville. So,
yeah, and I think the thing there to understand is, without going into a lot of detail, you need to know who those two individuals are. So, anybody who would like to know where their perspective came from, just do some research on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very good. All right, I'm going to, let's see, I think Lucinda North is next. Or Nord, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Nord.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Lucinda Nord, and I am the director of Indiana Library Federation. You already heard from Bob Swaney from Carmel Clay, so I won't reiterate his points. I do want to respond to some of the questions that I heard earlier. One is, I hear this genuine concern about children especially during COVID, and all of the screen time that they have and what they might be able to access. So I do want to talk a little bit about filtering. And so just to assure you that libraries already follow both state and federal laws regarding to the Children's Internet Protection Act that does require certain levels of filtering and limited access to things, for example, in the public library. So I just want to make sure that you are aware, and we can provide you additional information about how filters work, how that law is applied in Indiana. Libraries are absolutely diligent in managing the collections, whether print or electronic. Senator Leising asked some questions about the relationship between schools and public libraries. There are a range of relationships throughout the state, whether it is a shared card or shared access. So let me just talk a little bit about the electronic access, which is, I think, what you were asking about. Where some public libraries maybe have a robust electronic system of ebooks, there is the opportunity with, for example, one of the vendors, a parent can request an e-card that then would require the parent to have the child install an app, and then that app would have to be downloaded, and then it does require a PIN number that the parents actually do have control over. So there are levels of protection even in the materials that are accessed through the library. The reality is children are accessing materials from home devices during this pandemic, and the school folks can talk to you a lot about all of the provisions of the school level filters that run through school devices when it is a school provided device. And so they're not accessing, I just want to let you know that we too share the concern about safety of children related to there would not be inappropriate things, but it is a question of who decides. Any library collection is going to include materials that either do not appeal or maybe even offend someone in the community. And that's why those local board processes are so important, that Indiana public and school libraries maintain these locally approved collection development processes, how materials can be challenged. And Bob Sweeney talked a little bit about that challenge process. So that's...
Okay. She was done. I stopped it a little quick there, but so for me, a couple things I want to say. She said that there were cases already that she could point out. After the testimony was all finished, we asked her, Eric Miller asked her in the hallway, give me one of those cases. She couldn't do it. And the reason is because there is no case. There is no case because they are absolutely exempt from there being a case like what we are talking about. So they're using other things that do not have to do with these books. And it's so frustrating for someone to go in there and testify something that is not true. And she couldn't give it to us. And actually, I cut it off a little early. But Senator Raatz even asked her to get with them because what she was testifying did not line up with what they what they knew or they were hearing about this protection. The other thing that is driving me crazy, and this has been a common thread throughout the whole thing, is kids will be kids. They can get it at home. Why are we in our schools, in our library, setting the standards in those institutions to the lowest denominator, right? Why? You should be setting it to the highest denominator. You should be setting the example and not just saying, well, kids are going to be kids, so why do we have to worry about it? That is ridiculous, because I've got news for all of these people, including Miss Nord. My children don't access it the way that some others may in other homes, right? I do everything I can to protect my children from this. And you don't get to decide that, well, somewhere out there's homes that are getting better access to it, so we're not going to worry about it in the schools and the libraries. That is ridiculous. It's irresponsible. And it's exactly why we need this exemption off of the books.
I would totally agree with everything you said. I would add to that they always deflect. They want no accountability, no responsibility, and they deflect. And the problem is that they pick and choose when they're going to use that deflection onto parents, right? So parents are the blame for a lot of the things that are going on. But when the parents push back, or citizens pushback, then they don't like that. And so that is a huge issue that I have, because we're talking about taxpayer funded institutions who do not want to be held accountable and do not want to be responsible for what they are distributing to minors. That is my big issue. And so that is one of the sticking points I have. Parents trust when they send their kids to school and when they send them to the library that they're in good hands. They don't realize how bad things have gotten and how much is out there that is targeting the minds of their children. And so I think something that's frustrating is these that know that parents send their kids their most vulnerable and most prized possessions to them don't have their best interest at heart when it comes to some of these things. And so that's what's so aggravating. And the schools then take the parental role and control, and they do whatever they tend to do whatever they want. And I'm not saying that there aren't any good teachers. There are a lot of good teachers that are caught in a very bad system, right? Yeah. So let's take that into perspective. But at the same time, these institutions as a whole are trusted with our next generations of educating them, and they're hooking them on porn. And they want no accountability and they want no responsibility for doing anything about it. They just want to continue to do it. And that's frustrating to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know how you can testify that your, priority is protecting children, but then excuse this opposition to the bill. It doesn't make sense. Right. So next we have, this will be the last one. I think this one's really important. It was from the closing remarks.
K through 12. Those minds are still in development stages, and they're impressionable. And we always, as I said earlier in my comments, we always talk about for the children. That's a slogan a lot of people use, for the children. Here's a chance that we can do something for the children. Not going to hurt any adults. We certainly don't want to hurt any teachers or librarians. We don't do that. But if we can establish this here, is just be aware, if you're in that line of work, be aware that you're taking precautions to try to check anything that could get through to the kids. That's all we're trying to do here. That's all we're wanting to do with this bill. And I know that all of you represent your districts. You're good people. You wouldn't be here if you didn't have your heart in this. I'm just asking for your support on this measure. I certainly don't want to do anything that's going to cause anybody hardships. I think that's a fair piece of legislation. It's plain. That's not complicated. Not making anything that it's not. So with that, I'll quit here, and I want to thank all of you for your questions and your comments, and I sure hope you'll support me on this bill. I really do. Thank you very much.
Senator Qaddoura.
Senator Toms, I want to concur with you on a statement that you made that we all collectively share the goal to protect our children. I have two daughters who are 13 and 15. So this issue of protecting children and raising them in our households to be productive members of society, this is something that I haven't heard anyone on either side of the argument saying that's not what we want to achieve. My issue with the bill are a couple of pieces. A few days ago, we passed, I think it was Senate Bill 1, the civil liability bill here from the General Assembly, to proactively protect businesses from a flood, potential hypothetical flood of lawsuits because of COVID-19, which actually took lives away. People died because of COVID-19. And I find myself here talking about lawyers testifying, saying that they are concerned that this will open the floodgates of lawsuits. So that's a concern. The second thing, it seemed from the arguments, the way, and I'm not criticizing, I support everyone's right to be passionate about their arguments. But it seemed that the scientific backing behind the arguments that were portrayed today is that society's ills, from family divorces to STDs to broken households, seem to all come back to the idea that that because of these materials that are being disseminated, and I don't know to what extent, which school corporations or which school districts, it boils down to that as if there's a statistical correlation that directly said all of these problems in society are occurring because of this. I find that to be difficult because I know many other societal issues exist that contribute to these types of. My final point, in Texas, there was a case that a school board wanted to censor material. They deemed a portion of it to be harmful. And some of that material actually did not have anything to do with pornography. It had to do with minorities, with the history of African Americans and Black and brown communities in the United States, and it was challenged in court. I'm afraid that this is a slippery slope, again, not arguing about protecting our kids, that the censorship mechanism for school curriculums at a time when it's regulated and there's a law in Indiana that exists against these harmful practices outside of school district, all of these bring concerns to me. I don't question the intention. I'm not questioning our collective role to protect our kids, but I feel that this bill is problematic, not because of the intentions, but I was told, and I'll conclude, I promise, Mr. Chair, 11 years ago, I was an intern here in this Senate, and I was told this General Assembly can never legislate morality because you can't enforce it. It's difficult, and it is subjective to each household. I'm engaged with my wife with raising our kids. We monitor everything that the school sends, all of the homeworks, all of that stuff. And I encourage every family to be very engaged in the lives of their kids. I appreciate you for your intentions. I appreciate your sincere thoughts. I'll be opposing this bill because I have very serious concerns about the structure, the legal structure of the bill, but I appreciate you.
Okay, I'm going to go straight to our next slide here because it's really important. So Senator Qaddoura just said that he was told 11 years ago as an intern, and it seems to be that the way he makes decisions, which is concerning because he was told that you cannot make laws based on morality. So let's just take a look at this. I would ask that Senator Qaddoura read the Indiana Constitution, especially because he is on the Education Committee. Right here, Indiana Constitution, Article 8, Education, states, "It shall be the duty of the General Assembly to encourage by all suitable means moral, intellectual, scientific, and agricultural improvement." Right here. It is your duty, Mr. Qaddoura, to encourage moral improvement. So I would ask that you maybe review what your job is as a senator. And I would also ask that you reconsider your support towards this bill because it is clear in our Constitution that you can make that decision. So for me, that's just very important for everyone to understand.
Absolutely. That was a great point, Jennifer, and I'm glad you found that in the Constitution to point that out to him. So maybe he needs to go back and read that again and re-educate himself on what his real role is as a state senator. I would just follow up with this and say he brought up the censorship, right? Well, again, if you deflect to the communist goals, you will see that they use that as a tactic in promoting this material. And so obscenity, again, is not protected under free speech. I mean, the Supreme Court has made that determination. So that is the statute we are to function under. And so I would just remind him that censorship doesn't apply to obscenity. It's not protected for free speech. And apparently he doesn't understand that. Yep. And I'm really confused as to how he became a senator if he doesn't understand the Constitution and he doesn't understand the obscenity is not protected free speech. So it was a great point to grab that and to point that out. So I don't know what else you wanted to say about that, but
that was just my major point. When I heard him say that, I thought, wait a minute. I think you need to review what your job is
Right.
So that's all, and hopefully he will, and maybe when this comes to a vote, he'll side with doing the right thing then, because it seems very, very clear what is the right thing.
Absolutely.
And I would ask, after all of this, we have pointed out the misleading information that was given by the opposition. And so I would ask Mr. McRobert, Mr. Swaney, Mrs. Nord, Senator Ford, Senator Qaddoura to reconsider your stance on this, because I think you didn't take everything into consideration of what was going on here. And that was really, and I wanted to thank Senator Toms for sponsoring this bill. And I thought we would just end with the real unintended consequences, unless you have something else you wanted to add.
No, I would just like to say we really do appreciate Senator Toms taking this on. This is not an easy issue, and when you take on a topic like this, you get attacked from multiple levels, and you expose the darkness. And so I think that's what we're seeing through this process. Is you're seeing these entities that are supposed to be there to protect children are in fact not protecting the children, and they're willing to push back and say, no, we're not. We don't want those unintended consequences for us. We don't care what they are for your kids, but we don't want them for us. And so I think that's been very telling through this whole process. But we're very thankful that there are several senators now that are signing on to this bill that will simply protect children. There is no ambiguity about this. And I think Aaron Negengard pointed that out. This is not ambiguous at all. It's simply taking state statute that's already there, and it's basically removing public schools and public libraries. That's basically essentially what it does. And so how you can twist that into something that it's not is pretty disturbing, to say the least. And so it's very telling as to who's doing what on this platform and who's really looking out for the children. So
yeah, exactly. I agree completely. If you haven't joined Purple for Parents Indiana, we're looking out for those kids. So find us on Facebook and join our group. But so I just wanted to end with a couple of things. Through our research, we actually do know what the I'm using this, lightly, unintended, right, consequences of providing children this material is. So I just wanted to end and give a couple of those things. So a survey showed that found that 26% of adolescents aged 13 to 17 actively seek out pornography weekly or more often. Research has shown that children are more susceptible than adults to addictions and to developmental effects on the brain. A study of sexually reactive children and adolescents found that those who use pornography were more likely to engage in compulsive lying, reoccurring theft, truancy, deception, and manipulation, arson, coerced vaginal penetration, forced sexual acts, expression of sexually aggressive remarks, and bestiality. And we have many. I'll do one more. So a 2013 survey of general population of the internet pornography users revealed those who intentionally sought pornography at a younger age were significantly more likely to be users of pornography exhibiting the sexual abuse of animals and children. These are consequences that we cannot afford for our institutions that influence our children to take lightly. So we just ask that everyone reconsider. And please, for anybody that sees this video, you need to pass it on, pass on the information, reach out to us if you have any questions. And we are on a timeline. I mean, we need people to contact their officials. Rhonda, you can, what should they do right now?
So right now, the bill will be voted on in committee on Wednesday. The committee meets at 1:45. So we have from now until that point to make calls to the committee members, and we've shared that link before. We can do it again when we post this video, to all the email the addresses and the phone numbers for you to make those phone calls and send those emails. We've really got to get behind those senators who are willing to stand and protect our children. And so right now there are 8 Republicans and 4 Democrats. Although in today's society you would hope that would be the case, they would vote that way, but. Anyway, it put the pressure on them. And then once it comes out of committee, which we are very hopeful that it will, once it comes out of committee, then we will need you to contact your state senators. And it probably wouldn't be a bad idea to go ahead and start having those conversations with them anyway, to let them know you're watching this bill and that when it comes out of the committee on Wednesday, you want them to vote for it and support it. And, encourage them to sign on to the bill. I mean, we've gotten several more this week, which we're very thankful for. I think there's Senator Leising, Senator Messmer. I can't remember the other 2 right off the bat that are posted online. Senator Zay was one. So encourage them to sign on to this bill. If they really want to stand up and protect children, this shouldn't even be a question. So have that conversation with them and ask them to sign on as an author, a co-author. And then have them vote for it when it comes out of the Senate. And then what will happen is it will go over to the House and it will start the process all over. So once it does that, then we are hoping that when it goes to the Education Committee, that we will have another hearing on it, and we will be down there to testify again. And then we will need some help with phone calls and follow up from there. But immediately right now, we need you to contact the committee members, and Jennifer and I will put the link below in the comments below this video so that you can start doing that this week. We've got to keep that pressure on until it comes out and it gets passed.
Yep. Awesome. All right. Thank you. And, we just ask everyone to get going, get to where you're taking action on what's going on.
Yeah. The pressure you've applied already is having an impact. So thank you guys. Keep it up. You're doing good. Thank you for the support, and let's plow this through.